against some peoples from outside or some groups from outside. And I'm a great believer in participatory mapping. It's not going to solve all the problems, obviously, but it's adding, it's giving respect to local knowledge. I think that's what, whether that we don't necessarily have to agree with that local knowledge, and we may not even understand it. That's often the case when we get into cosmovisions and things like that. Us outsiders don't really understand it, but have to recognize that it's there. And I do think mapping, pictures are worth 1,000 words, a map is worth 10,000 words maybe. You can get a hell of a lot of knowledge exchange compressed in people making some kinds of maps of their current space and their historic space as well. So we've written a few manuals on that, which is problematic, because when you make it a manual, you start to say this is the way to do it, or this is the way not to do it. But that's an ongoing, endless issue. And just lots and lots of practice with people, mostly small groups, and more rural rather than urban.
Thanks, Mike. Yuri, to you.
Okay, hi, my name is Jirka. I'll try to be quick, also from the reason I need to leave around 4 to pick up my daughter from kindergarten. Geographer, I would say pretty much most of the stuff, as Mike said, applies to me, minus 40 years of experience. And I work mainly with participatory mapping, web-based participatory mapping. And I focus on perception of safety a lot recently. Working together also with police data. Are people actually afraid in places they are supposed to be afraid, or is it just a memory of the space, and how this develops throughout the time, and how we can actually communicate urban planning or participatory urban planning with people without the technical experience, without technical knowledge, how we can turn it into a normal language outside of academia. So this is what is my most interest now. But coming from a geography, slightly cross GIS to community mapping.
So like a community information systems, perhaps.
Kind of. I mean, there's so many terms you can use and so many abbreviations. For me, it's one mesh. I mean, some people call it PGIS, some people call it community mapping. So that's for a very long discussion. But yes, I think most of us do pretty much the same. We just have different names for it.
Yes.
Thanks, Jirka. Emily.
All right. So I'm already getting really excited about this group. I have a rather different background, mainly just because I have less background. I've done some volunteering on and off throughout the years, working on participatory design projects, and also working with like local like neighborhood associations and that kind of thing. More on the implementation and more on the policy side. Currently, I am a master's student here at Aalto in Finland, working on my degree in planning and transportation. Marketta is actually one of my professors, and so when she tells you what she's interested in, you will know what I'm interested in, because she's the reason I'm here. But I'll say that currently my main project is more about collaboration in design and planning, not so much about participatory mapping, but I also do advocacy work for the student union here that involves participation between students and society and the university. So sort of touching gently all of the topics without being properly enmeshed in PPGIS. So I hope that I can bring some different perspective in, maybe as an emerging professional, slightly more practice oriented than research oriented. So I'm really excited to kind of see how this develops.
Nice to have you here. Thanks, Emily. Marketta.
Okay, hello everybody. I am Marketta Kyttä and I work in Aalto University as a professor of land use planning. Although my background is actually in environmental psychology, and I defended my PhD in Department of Architecture. So I'm some kind of weird combination of psychologist and urban planner. And I've been interested in participatory mapping since 90s, I would say, when we first started to study child-friendly environments, and we noticed that one methodology happens to be pretty useful, and then which was mapping with stickers. and later in maybe 2004, we started the first online projects with participatory mapping. And ever since, we have done quite a lot of work in trying to actually to do a revolution in participatory planning to really promote large-scale public participation. And I think we have a little bit succeeded, at least in Nordic countries, where participatory mapping is nowadays very widely used in various cities.
Nice.
And but besides participatory planning, our latest themes we have studied quite a lot has been environmental health promotion research, and participatory mapping allows us to do that context sensitively, which I think is actually very important step in that research field.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also working as a master's program leader, hopefully not for long anymore. It is super tough. I have led a program called Spatial Planning and Transportation Engineering for a number of years. Lastly, maybe I can just mention that maybe not everybody know that we organized the second conference in International Society of Participatory Mapping in Aalto University last summer. No, summer 2019, luckily, before Corona. So that was an important step. And best wishes from the border zone between Russia and Finland. That's where I am at the moment.
Thank you, Marketa. Rudo.
Okay, hi, good morning, everyone. So my name is Rudo Kemper. I'm originally from the Caribbean, an island called Curaçao. For the past 10 years or so, I've worked with indigenous peoples in South America predominantly, as well as a little bit in Canada, Jamaica, working on especially participatory projects, much more practice-oriented, focused on acquisition of land rights and reclamation processes, as well as a mapping of traditional knowledge having to do with cultural heritage, oral history as well. In the past years, I've been more involved in building technology. So I was with an organization called Amazon Conservation Team and for the past 5 years, working on a project called Terra Stories, which is for mapping oral histories. And I just recently joined another organization called Digital Democracy, which is really focused on building technology as the main thing that they do. Have a software called Mapeo, which is also for participatory mapping in an offline context. Very interested in questions around remote community access to technologies, methodologies that work in non-Western cultures, South America and elsewhere. So very happy to be involved in this as a more practice-oriented person.
Thanks very much, Rudo. Sergio.
Hi, my name is Sergio Acosta. I would like starting apologizing for my English, as it is not my native language. Mine is Spanish, and I'm here. I think because actually I'm an architect working with GIS for a long time and deeply involved in what is open source. Geographic information systems, and I'm part of OSGEO, the Open Geospatial Foundation, and deeply involved in one of its committees, the one education that we call Geo for All. And we have a project here that it's maybe why I am here. It's the development of a GIS, especially for education, for basic education, that we spread all along the country, and we have a very nice experience with this, promoting its use, and we have organized competitions with this, that with the use of open source GIS in school, doing projects with students and its professors from geography and other disciplines. And I think that we can do a big contribution from the open source community to the participatory mapping and GIS.
Thanks, Sergio. That was excellent. Richard, to you next.
Hi everyone. I recognise quite a few faces on this call from the past nearly 25 years, I think it is. So I'm a Professor of Urban Planning and GIS at the University of Manchester in the UK. As I've just sort of said, I started doing PPGIS in the mid-1990s. That then sort of evolved and developed into smart cities research funded by the EU. Not sure if I'll get any more EU funding in the future, unfortunately. And then I spent 4 years, unfortunately, as head of department, so I was dragged more into university admin. But the carrot that they dangled in front of me for doing 4 years of university admin was a 12-month research sabbatical, which meant I could get back into research. That finished actually it was last January of last year. And as part of that, I pulled together a rather large research proposal, which I found out in the summer has been funded. So I've just been awarded £8 million by our Natural Environment Research Council to basically develop a kind of rather large online digital platform to engage people across the whole of the UK, from the public through to the private sector, public sector, third sector, all scales of government, from local up to national, regional, the devolved administrations, in a rather large sort of environmental decision support system. And we're focusing on two big aspects, one around the impact of climate change on the UK, and the other one is looking at the relationship between people's health and the environment. And this was a proposal we put in before anyone had mentioned the word COVID-19. So it's not necessarily a COVID-focused project, but it is about the sort of spatial relationships between environmental pollution and public health. So there's sort of a large participatory element to that, and that is going to keep me busy for the next 5 years. But I will stop there because we've still got quite a few other people to get through.
Thanks, Richard, and congratulations. Logan, you're next.
Hi everyone, Logan Cochran, wearing a few hats, Carleton University, but on leave from Carleton, currently based in Doha, Qatar at HBKU. Also adjunct at Awassa University in Ethiopia, where most of my research is around rural issues, food security, using knowledge co-production, of which participatory mapping has been a part. And I think all of those experiences have made me look at questions of power, inclusion, politics, and trying to integrate geographies of social differentiation. And I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Logan. Susanna, you're next.
Hello to everybody. I am Susana Barrera. I come from the Universidad Nacional de Colombia. I have been working with GIS in several topics, especially participative GIS. I have been working with the P, and the P for us is powers, is politics, is, well, which is bridge in English, but in Spanish it's P also, bridges between qualitative and quantitative methods, between different topics, between different stakeholders. So I have been working with that. I work also with water management, with planning, and with social cartography. Another of my interests is landscape analysis, understanding landscapes as a materialization in the space of all these relationships of people and how they build the space. And as a geographer, then we have been working a lot with different topics and concepts, so as territory, space, place, and so on. I have several practice work also with groups of people in different places of my country, especially in the topics I told you, mostly with planning and how to involve these new technologies in the narrative of cartographies.
Thank you, Susanna. Renee.
Hi, everybody. I'm Renee Sieber. I'm at McGill University in Montreal in Canada. So I've been involved in public participation GIS since the mid-90s. I started the PPGIS conference in 2002. I came to mapping via spatial data handling. So I am a techie first. And over the years, I've increasingly been interested in the software architecture and how that modifies local knowledge, how that enables or constricts people's ability to build their own applications. And so I'm very much in the top of Sherry Arnstein's ladder, where citizen empowerment comes via counter apping as opposed to, say, counter mapping. And I'm recently interested in artificial intelligence and GeoAI, and whether the public can build their own AI tools to advocate for social change, particularly with a technology that is so opaque and proprietary and confounds most of us. Yet it's being used increasingly to automate decisions. So where does that leave the public? Where does that leave marginalized communities if not even the policymakers know how the technology works? So that's the space I am in right now. And I have a couple of natural language processing projects, one of which Arena might be interested in because it's smart city related. And I'm also interested in the feature detection side as well. That's it.
Thanks, Renee. And finally, Mookie, although I did see Piotr appear and disappear very briefly.
Yes, my connection is not good enough, so I'm on mute. I'll try to put the video. It's actually quite funny to be after Renee. I'm always saying that we are the twins of PPGIS, because we are both coming with tech and participatory stuff in a very weird way since the beginning, plus the environmental bent to it. And I'm still kind of thinking about the first time that I've met Rena and I think Renee talking in the AAG, and 20 years ago. Anyway, let's stop from there. So Muki Haklai, I'm at University College London. I'm the co-director of the Extreme Citizen Science Group at UCL, and I'm also co-director and founder of Mapping for Change, which is a social enterprise that is owned by UCL and is dedicated to participatory mapping and citizen science. So my starting point is public access to environmental information. I got very interested in that just because of some coincidence, both of interest, but also a coincidence of something that happened in 1998, which called the Aarhus Convention, which became central to what I'm doing. So it's thinking about environmental democracy and concept that it involves public access to environmental information, participation in decision making, and access to justice, which map quite nicely to Einstein ladder. And since then, by the way, mentioning the Einstein ladder, I'm also, like Richard is also part of it, and I'm also part of it. Like we are all members of the Einstein ladder factory. So we all created bits of it. Mike is actually also, I think there was actually several workers in the ladder factory on this call. So that's an interesting aspect, but, and participation and involvement in technology and people and environmental aspects was something that went on throughout my career. In the past 10 years, citizen science took over, and now I'm in something that I sometimes call the Stan Openshaw curse, which again, I know that several of us are experiencing. So for those of you who don't know, Stan Openshaw wrote in 1991 an article called GIS as Humpty Dumpty for Geography. And one of the memorable paragraphs there is that, a person with a GIS can work in the morning on disease in Ethiopia, and in the lunchtime will work on retail properties in London and whatever. And because I've been sucked to citizen science, it's even worse because I'm finding myself having a conversation about health in the morning, then talking with physicists who want to do something about quantum physics in the afternoon, and some ecologists in the evening. It's very, very confusing, but delightful, and lead me to sometimes calling myself an undisciplined academic because I lost all discipline. I am still a geographer inherently. My group is actually developing geographical participatory technology. We're doing things both in the global north and in the global south. We're developing different tools. So there is in this call several people who are developing really interesting tools, Mokita, Jirka, really fantastic things, Richard with the things that the pioneering work back in the 90s and so on. So, and John, of course, I can't ignore that. So there is so many things that it's delightful to see everyone on this call coming together. And when you work out back to where we started, it was different streams, and seeing it all coming together is really impressive. It is important to know that in the context of this journal, I'm the associate executive chief, chief editor of Citizen Science Theory and Practice, which is now becoming the main journal of citizen science. So I'm really interested in the overlap because of professional aspect, but it might mean about my ability to contribute. But on the other hand, there is things to share.
Well, that's excellent, Mookie. Thank you. That's actually super interesting because I feel sometimes, it's overwhelmed by the task of trying to establish a new journal. It's some days I feel like, whoa, we got this, and then other days I'm like, particularly just after I've spoken with Renee, I'm like, oh my God, there's so much to do. So really briefly, my name is John. I'm John Corbett. I'm an associate prof at UBC in the Okanagan. I kind of wear two hats like so many people here. On the one hat, we do a lot of really bespoke software design, working with indigenous communities, primarily in Canada, around their very particular set of needs to address land-related issues. And so sort of, I got into this in the past by doing sort of, relatively simplistic, hey, this is what we do with participatory mapping. Let's put it into a digital form, around sort of selective sharing of different markers and polygons on maps. But these days, we seem to be doing a lot more sophisticated stuff related to managing large sort of portfolios of data and selectively sharing that and selectively viewing that. And so, yeah, a lot of our efforts are around doing these types of projects. So we're working on 2 large open source projects right now. One is the crafting of a geospatial portal, and the other is developing a tool that can be used specifically by First Nations as a way of countering the referrals management process, the referrals process. So the way it works in Canada is before any form of natural resource management can take place, there needs to be this entire process of consultation. But it's extremely complex for many communities to be able to deal with the vast quantity of referrals that they have. So essentially we've developed a tool that can be used by this community. Techie, and then on the other side, like we just got a SHIRT grant to do an examination how impactful participatory mapping has been over the last 40 years. And so it's going to be really sort of enmeshed in sort of the social science side of things, of returning to what was 5 sort of critically important projects we cite as academics and that we talk about as practitioners, and going back and revisiting them and think about, well, what are the actual systemic impacts related to this type of work? So I probably will be approaching all of you, at some point to try and get your opinions related to before we go on and discuss some of the other aspects of on our agenda. So would you mind just really quickly introducing yourself?
You might have broken up, John. Were you talking to Peter?
Yeah, I was.
Oh,
Peter,
hi.
can you hear me?
Yeah, barely. I'm sorry. Sorry for coming late to the meeting. It's kind of early here on Pacific Coast. But anyway, I'm Piotr Jankowski. I'm a professor of geography at San Diego State University. My research interests have been for a long time in spatial decision support systems and in collaborative spatial decision support systems with applications to transportation, land use, water resources. I was involved in a number of experiments, field experiments, and real applications of SDSS, and then I became interested in EPGIS, late 90s, early 2000s. I've kept that interest for quite some time. That's briefly about myself.
Brilliant, thank you, Piotr. So let's move on to the second point. I've got everyone, I think. That's a nice thing about Zoom, is that, you can work in this grid form. God, something's like fundamentally geographic about it, where I can start in the top right-hand corner and end in the bottom left-hand corner. It all works perfectly. What I'm going to ask Charlotte to do, because I think you have like the power of the hosting, could you just pull up the spreadsheet of all of the people actually on the editorial board? And what I'll probably do is actually share this with you, and I'm not going to expect any answers unless something really—
I shared it in the chat.
Okay, but can we put it on the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Because do I have the power to share my screen? Well, the thing is, I don't actually have it open.
I'll have it open. Hold on, I'll share it. I just wanted to make sure I hit all of my open tabs.
And so what I'll do is I will actually share this link with you as well. But this is the list of all of the people currently on the editorial board. Obviously, we can't get absolutely everybody, but at the same time, I feel like we've got a really nice collection of people from around the world with different experiences, enmeshed in or embedded in different technologies, covering different regions. And so, with the hope being that, this is something that we can add to as we need. I'm thinking, Emily, it's super nice to have a graduate student here on board as well. And perhaps this is something as well that we should think about, trying to get some sort of, graduate student representation. So rather than us maybe unpacking this right now, what I'll do is I will share this list with you. And then what we can do is that if there's anyone glaringly missing from the list, we can reach out and actually invite them. We have about 4 or 5 other invitations that are actually sort of out circulating right now, but we haven't heard back from those individuals. So yes, any additional recommendations would be great. Charlotte, can we maybe just go back to the regular screen, and I'll actually just share this with us in future. So the whole idea, and thanks, Mookie, for sort of presaging this. The idea behind this journal is that there's an awful lot of people writing about participatory mapping. We see this in health journals, we see this in planning journals, we see this in development journals. But at the same time, there's no sort of central repository around participatory mapping or participatory spatial planning or community mapping. And we've heard all of these different terms, even in this one short meeting. And so we were thinking, well, there's a really nice opportunity aligning itself with the development of the International Society of Participatory Mapping, that we should have a journal that sort of, that runs parallel to that. But not a journal in a sort of very traditional sense, but really a journal whereby we attract interesting stories from a range of different people, not just academics but also practitioners. Obviously in the sort of digital realm that we exist in right now, and because of the sort of expansive sort of imagery behind cartography and mapping, one where we can draw on multiple media types, one whereby we can sort of create a repository or a centralized repository for all things participatory mapping, cartographic, GIS related. And so, that really was the sort of broad idea. There's nothing there. We feel like there's an opportunity, but also we feel like there's a need. I feel in some ways that, there are too many sort of schisms within our practice. And so I also sort of had this sort of, this sort of deep sort of hope that in fact this can act as a sort of cohering entity where in fact we can actually start to create a very clear community of practice whereby we can actually communicate with each other and share ideas with each other, and so we can actually sort of really grow our network of both practitioners as well as academics related in the field. And so that's really the idea behind the journal. Charlotte, I don't know if you actually want to talk about the society as well, very briefly. I know you'd sent me an email, or would you rather do that later?
I mean, I can do that right now. So as I said, the International Society of Participatory Mapping was developed with Rudo and a lot of other people, both academics and practitioners of participatory mapping, back in 2017 after Professor Greg Brown hosted the kind of first international participatory mapping conference. And we realized that there needed to be far more representation from practitioners and support for people who need to access technology for participatory mapping. So the goal is that you would pay membership dues yearly, and then that money would go back into providing people from low-income countries with access to technology through grants. Last year, for the last couple of years, we were mostly focused on using that money for travel grants for our conference. But even before COVID happened, we had decided to go entirely virtual for our conference. So our last one was in Aalto University, thanks to Marketta. But for the next one, it'll be entirely on our network. I went ahead and put the link to the ISPM network. We're offering you guys all a free 1-year membership. So I suggest that you make an account. It's a space where you can engage each other, but also we'll be keeping it as a living library or repository for everything participatory mapping. So if you're interested in learning more about different software, you can find it there. If you're interested in taking a course, we're going to start having more courses on our network. And so you'll probably get emails from us when there's updates on the network. We really hope that you'll engage and participate each other there. There's a special committee space on the network specifically for the Editorial Advisory Committee. And we meet once a month, and we're always looking for at-large representatives. So if you're interested in becoming more involved, please feel free to reach out and contact me. We have a 4-year tenure, so next year, actually, the majority of us will probably be leaving. I'll probably be working almost entirely at that point on the editorial committee instead of ISPM. So I'll be making that transfer in the next year. Or if you're interested in participating in our digital conference, please keep a lookout for that email as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Charlotte.
Oh, and shameless plug. I've been asked by Springer to do an edited volume on evaluating participatory mapping software. I'll be having the full proposal finished in mid-October, and so I'll be looking for solicitation for chapters for that book. So if you're interested in the way that we evaluate participatory mapping software, please reach out and get a hold of me.
Brilliant, thank you, Charlotte. And one other thing related to that as well is that, I don't know if you know, but Giacomo Rambaldi, who has worked for this organization called CTA in Wageningen in the Netherlands for, I don't know, the last 20 years, and they have actually just closed. And so we've actually, the society's actually assumed all of the digital sort of products that were related to CTA, related to participatory mapping, including a lot of the big sort of training materials that they had and other sorts of things. So that also will be incorporated into the what do you say, the assets of the society as well. So the third point in the agenda was to discuss the first issue, and I suppose in some ways, you know, this is after a discussion with the board and with a number of other different folk as well, that what we should maybe think about doing in the first issue, somewhat contentious, is that we would invite 10 to 15 of the most notable practitioners, academics of participatory mapping, and we would pose a very simple question to them. What is participatory mapping? We would expect the product or the papers or the articles to be less than 5 pages in length. You know, citation, you know, a minimal number of references. But essentially what we would do is we would open it up to a discussion around what participatory mapping is, because quite clearly it means different things to different people. And so there's sort of 2 reasons for doing this. Firstly, to generate a dialogue around this particular issue, but also from the perspective, and here we go, I got my academic hat here on, also from the perspective of citations, I think we need a compilation of different documents that allows us to do this. This type of set of reference documents, I think, could become a highly cited, you know, and much used product for graduate students, undergraduate students, for teaching, as well as for other academics as well. So, but I suppose the critical thing here is, you know, does the editorial board agree? Because of course we are fundamentally participatory in our nature. And then if we do agree, then we also need to identify, you know, who we should set out to invite to contribute. And again, I wanted the entry points to be as wide as possible, and not for people not to say, oh, you know, I don't have time to write you know, a huge great researched paper, but more for this to be a series of basically op-eds. So what do you think, guys? Rena. Unmute yourself, the meme of 2020.
So just, this is a very interesting point, and actually it connects to my question, which is that some of us were, we've been doing this since the 90s. At that time, if you'll remember, there wasn't any divide between environmental or urban or anything. In fact, I find such divides to be really unnecessary. Many of us have actually, I mean, I myself have come from physical geography to critical human geography. I do both sides. I work with OpenGIS. I do environmental projects as well as social projects. So this kind of segmentation has really bothered me, to be honest. And I've seen that segmentation kind of advance more and more, where, to be quite honest, PGIS, suddenly, I even heard this statement from one about to graduate PhD student, that career-wise, I think PGIS is more more hip, or this was a few years back, but nonetheless. So I think this is puzzling. So this is very nice to see we are trying to bring back. And I think that would be good for us, because it's really not necessary. We cross over. I mean, how do we, the artificiality of those boundaries is really counterproductive. So I hope that we are trying to unite. Is that one of the goals? I don't know.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I absolutely agree that we find cohesion in our differences. I totally agree, and Rena, I don't think it's a bad thing to even talk about those sorts of things in the paper as well, because I feel that we need to be as embracing as possible, and our embrace needs to be as wide as possible.
Yeah, I think this is something we should address. Personally, because I've sort of seen this going on for a while. I do have no stakes in any of this, because I like doing research. I think my first community information systems project was in 1993, when I was very young and just starting PhD. And so this is a passion for me before it became a buzzword, before it became popular or hip. But at the same time, like, I love environmental research myself, having been from physical geography background. So it's been disquieting to see these divides. So I would like an honest attempt on this platform to bridge those and not have these separations. I think that does us harm.
Excellent, thank you. Susanna.
Well, I just want to say that in this topic, actually I have been working with a group since 1995. And we have been always thinking about many issues and writing less than thinking. But we have been, once we made a very nice exercise when we were comparing different kinds of cartography, and especially answering, questioning ourselves what was that, what were the differences between all those means that we had now. So then I have here my table. It's in Spanish, so I'm not going to show you. But then we did something like we asked who did it, how did them, which methods and tools, what was the intention and the message behind that, for whom, what is the reference framework, and which one was the external agent and the external strength that was just directing that. So we came out with 5 types of cartography. So then we talk about participate, social, official, alternative, and collaborative. And all of them have several differences between all those issues that I told you before. It is very interesting because today I'm teaching a class in participative GIS, and remember that yesterday a person was telling me, a student was asking me, well, Susanna, this is participative, or this is social cartography, or what is this? Then I was thinking, and I was saying, I don't really know. There are several issues in there, but what I think is that we can call it like geographic information technology or something like that, because we are working with several issues. Well, this is one of the things that I wanted to tell you. And the other one is that you were saying here, and talking about different issues on PPGIS that you have been doing on, but we have also done lots of issues. And then I had a conference, I think it was last month or so, where I tried to make a history of where we came out with this. There are several things and that came from the north or the global north, but there are several things that came from us, and those are very important as well. And what I'm seeing now today with the things we are doing is that we have lots of sensitivity, we have lots of art in what we are doing, because we want to reach people. We have lots of technology we don't really develop. I don't know how to do it, but we use some of them and we adapt some of them on the things we want. We are very concerned about communication. We are very concerned about management, because we think that everything is full of our geopolitics of knowledge. So we are thinking and working on those things. So we have a kind of history of the first thing that we were worried about in 1995 and what we have now. So when I listen to you and you say, well, we did the participatory things, I know the work of, for instance, Sergio did a lot, that's a lot of things in Latin America. Sometimes I think that I'm really happy that we have this meeting, because it's like north, south, east, west, we're all together. But I really think that we all need to see what is the history of the GIS, participatory GIS, because as you all know, most of us are influenced with the north issues, and we also have our own story. So I think that it could be very nice to hear about all those stories and to try to do a map of what all of us have been thinking in a horizontal way. This is what I am thinking. That's it.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Susanna. I think Mike has a question or a comment.
Yes, thanks. I couldn't find raising my hand, although Charlie was trying to help me, but somehow it disappeared off this screen. Yes, I'm not going to talk about, as you correctly say, we're not going to start discussing what are these 150 different versions of what participatory GISP mapping means. I just think one very general thing is, as we develop in the journal and the ideas which come in and out of it and so on, we're going to have some kind of fuzzy boundary between participation in general, participatory approaches, participatory investigations, research in general, and participatory mapping, because otherwise the world is endless. We have to bring it back.
But that's not what I was saying. I think you are all misunderstanding the point I was making, which is that I think the group, the scholarship, the researchers, there was a schism within the group of scholars. So it seemed like suddenly we went from PPGIS to PGIS to suddenly different groups altogether. I'm not sure why that happened or how that happened, and I'm not interested in any blame game. But I'm asking, is this an effort to bring everyone together? In which case, that's great.
Well, so, Rena, what I was going to say is that's a question, that's an issue which we're all engaged in, and we will be, but we'll have to come to some kind of maybe not consensus, at least some kind of boundaries about that. But the first immediate thing I wanted to say, a more practical one, is about the suggestion for this first volume, or part of this first volume. Obviously, I would fully agree that we want to show the extent, the range, the variety of forms of P mapping and the different, but we also, I think, want to show that there is some some red line which runs through it. So actually, the product of this first issue of an issue would be to show the range, but also to show where there is accordance, where there's agreement. And a nice, I think an interesting way to do the second part would be something like a Delphi, with the so-called experts we are here, plus many other people, to come to some kind of, and Delphi is a very good way of doing this, but you can come to some kind of semi-final position, interim position, which people accord with sufficiently, because we don't want only to show that there's 25 different ways of looking at it. And another practical thing is, you said the idea was to get 10 people or whatever number of people to write 5 or 6 pages. I mean, actually a danger there is that 2 or 3 people write exactly the same thing. Well, not exactly the same thing, but too much the same thing, and which is also not a very good way to fill the journal. So either you have to carefully select people who all think differently to get them to give their different views, but then we might lose out on this other side, which actually there is a red line running through participatory mapping.
Excellent. Well, interesting points, Mike, for sure. I recognize that we had only set up this meeting for 1 hour, and we have already reached the end of our 1 hour period. What I will do is I will try to, shall I think, is there an appetite to continue, or shall we, you're muted.
I own my own consultancy company, and my consultants and I have a 10 a.m. On this Zoom call. That's them trying to get in the waiting room.
Okay, so that I had a feeling that was what was happening.
That is what is happening, and now they're calling me like, why haven't we started our Scrum meeting yet?
Okay, not a problem at all.
Elijah and Peter just joined.
I know, Peter. Peter,
Yeah.
nice to see you, man.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think your last email said 10 a.m., so I was confused. But I will join the next one too.
And I did record this as well, and it's going to go on our YouTube channel for ISPM, and will be up in the network as well, because there was one other person who couldn't attend either session, so I wanted to make sure that they were recorded for them.
Brilliant. Well, and I want to say thank you so much, everyone, for joining. As Muga just said, great for starting this conversation, and also Richard as well. So I think we're going to have to continue our discussion, but I've really enjoyed seeing everyone, and thank you so much for making the effort to join us. And I look forward, I'll send you a follow-up email at some point today with a bunch of links, and then thinking about how we can continue the discussion. So thanks very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank
And
you.
look forward
Thanks,
to
John.
chatting soon. Cheers.
Well
Bye-bye.
done, John. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Hello, Mike.
Hi. Hi, Peter.
Hi.
Nice to see people.
And thank you for all.
Places.
Thank you.
Okay. Ciao, everyone.
Thanks, Mike.
Ciao.